in this world, we've stopped operating from the spectrum, and we go into these polarities, and that depletes. Everything needs balance. I don't know why. I had this moment where I was like, I know this is not conventional, but can I pull your birth chart? And I had never really pulled, I pulled birth charts for friends, but never like in a professional context. And I was like, of course, you've got this Chiron. This is your wound, like everything you're talking about. Like I saw I was seeing, like the chart was speaking to me directly to what the pain points were in the coaching session. I think whether the system leaves or remain, I think the gift will be, can we learn to work together?
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 388 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with a dear friend of mine, Ilona Pamplona. Ilona is an author, a life coach, and astrology and human design educator with a master's in wellness coaching. She combines traditional coaching theories with transformative tools to help professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives find clarity and overcome limiting beliefs. She's the author of This Journal is Your Mood Ring and the upcoming Human Design Made Easy. Ilona guides clients in reconnecting with their inner selves and achieving their highest potential. Listeners, I am very biased, but this conversation with Ilona is amazing. I think you'll really enjoy it. And I mean, Ilona is just magical. So I'll give you a little bit more commentary afterwards. I'll just let you enjoy this conversation with Ilona Pamplona. Ilona, welcome to Café con Pam. ¿Cómo
Gracias
estás?
por la invitación. I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. This is kind of like a long time coming, kind of. But you know, I don't know. I kind of want you to like be our regular.
I'm enrolled.
Perfect. So the question that we always ask, the first question is, what is your heritage?
So my father was from Colombia and my mother is from Ecuador. And I was born and raised in the tri-state area.
What is the tri-state area?
New York, New Jersey, and typically it's Connecticut, but in my head it was always Pennsylvania, but it's that New York, New Jersey area.
Okay. And your parents met here?
They met at a party in Long Island.
Okay. How fun.
And the rest is history.
Then here we are. How was it for you to navigate kind of like the two cultures?
Well, technically it was three, right? Because it was Colombian, Ecuadorian, and American, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it didn't even occur to me. I was the first one. They spoke Spanish to me in the home. My father didn't have a huge command of the language. My mom had full fluency before coming here. So it was just the experience, being bilingual, being multicultural. I lived in Queens when I was little, where I joked that my elementary school was like United Nations. Like we had kids whose families were, recent immigrants from the Caribbean, from, Eastern Europe, Latin America, right? So we were diverse in my original neighborhoods.
And so it wasn't ever a thing.
It wasn't ever a thing that we stuck out in the beginning. Once we moved to the suburbs of New Jersey, that changed a little bit. But my first few years up until third grade, it was like no one was from the same place, right? Everyone, we had the Irish, the Italian, the Caribbean, the Latinos, the South Americans, the Central Americans, right? Like it was a little bit of everything. And that was just normal for me.
Until
we moved to Jersey and the suburbs. And it was very very monocultural.
And how did you manage it?
That is an excellent question. I think because I had the formative years in a very multicultural space and I loved, the multicultural space, I just embraced it. I remember being in middle school and while everyone was buying like Madonna or like Nirvana, or like even because I was even before middle school, but like when people were buying those like pop culture CDs, I would I would have pilgrimages with my dad to New York to the Latin music stores, and I would buy my Paulina Rubio, my Bibi Gaitan cassettes, my Muñecos de Papel. If you watched Alcanza una Estrella, I mean, I know I'm dating
Yes.
myself, but I would Lucero, like all those pop, like because I was watching Univision, which was mostly
Claro.
Televisa programming at the time, and I was like, I love these guys. Like, I can't find them. Like, I can listen to Madonna and New Kids on the Block with my friends, but who's got my Lucero? Like, who's got my Ricky Martin? So I allowed myself to be like, yes, they have that, but like, I'm going to invest on this side.
And you had to travel to get that.
Pilgrimages. You don't understand. I remember I wanted the Muñecos de Papel soundtrack so bad. Like, I wanted their cassettes. So, and it was a cassette because it was cassette.
Claro, claro.
And we couldn't find it any. My father's like, Mija, I went to all the stores. They're not here. Like, he had to have a cousin from Colombia who happened to be traveling. Like, I had that imported. Like,
wow. Y mira, ahora tenemos streaming.
I know. Change the world. Although it's interesting because I still don't have that because they don't have the license to play in the United States, right? So, but yes, we still have digital access. I regret getting rid of some stuff, but aquí estamos. I have them all in my heart.
Correct. And eventually, hopefully, they'll make YouTube. Can you listen to them on
Yeah.
YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
No?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
For sure. So you and I often talk about how we both grew up with like brujo parents. And so in my case, it was my dad. In your case, it was your mom.
Yes.
And so it's this, we've had these conversations of this like spiritual awakening, whatever, that people talk about. And we're both like, pero es normal. O sea, what do you mean? How was it for you to grow up with a bruja mom?
Well, it's funny. I never think she was a brujita, but I always call her spiritually fluid, right? She was because she didn't practice the things as like the job, but like she was like, we need to figure out how to clear this. She listened to Walter Mercado every day in the morning. She would go to the local botanica for things to clear the energy. If someone came out and they had bad vibes, she's like, when they leave, she would pass the incienso para aclarar la energía. And so I remember in my formative years, before we moved to New Jersey, I'm like, we were in a bubble then, right? Like, it was just us. Like, I didn't have like that social experience once you get into middle school. But I remember thinking, oh, this is what we do. And when we moved to New Jersey, and I would talk about like, where's your Ganesh, or like, I would talk about like, well, we had CCD, the Catholic teachings before you do the confirmation, all that. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, so none of y'all also know about like Buddha and all this stuff, right? I remember Walter Mercado talking about the Orishas, like, and we just had such exposure. I think ultimately my mom was open enough to say what's here. And she always said, like, if it's good energy, it belongs here. So I remember in her altar, there was a Virgen de
Pero tenía un
Fatima.
altar.
Yeah. She has Virgen de Fatima, un baby Jesus, but also the Ganesh and the Buddha and the Kuan Yin, like, because it's all good energy. It's all good energy. So when people would look at me when I talk about, I remember, it's funny because I remember I had this moment of, because I do astrology and human design now, but I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, I feel like it's always been in my soul, in my bones, in my muscle memory, because I had a recollection of a science fair project in the 7th grade, and my dad and we had to do like a soldering thing with like electric units, and I created this board where you would touch one button to answer on the other side, and it was which body parts relate to which astrological signs. So,
oh
like,
my
for
gosh.
me, because I'm like, here we are doing science fair, but I'm like, I'm still got astrology in the brain. Like,
right.
this is it. This is such my consciousness. It was not normal, right? It was not normal for me to bring this in whatever space I was interacting with.
Totally. Did you ever, because this happened to me, and maybe it's because it was my father instead of my mother, but his mother was very Catholic. And so it was this conundrum that I was always in, from like calladita, te ves más bonita, don't ask questions, go to church, be a good girl. And my dad would be like, you're in your power, and whatever you put your mind into, it's what you will manifest. And like, so did you experience that kind of like, once you got out into the world, and you were like, oh, wait a minute, this is not everyone's thing. Did you experience that pull?
It's so funny because my father was super Catholic. Like my
Mm.
father was, born and raised on a farm. Colombians are very Catholic. My mom was raised in an aristocratic family in Ecuador, and she wasn't raised by her mom. And so there was a little bit of like, I don't want to say they were kind of left to be like feral cats, but they had a little bit more of like, they were either going to be conditioned or weren't. And my mom wasn't.
Mm.
And so, she believed in God, she believed in something bigger, but she wasn't necessarily like fixed. Like, in fact, I think my experience over the years is various of her family members have explored different branches of Jesus, is what I call it, right? Or like religion. And so there wasn't like, this is the only way. But they're all questioning. But my father was very like, he was very like this. I gave you the foundations. I would love for you to follow what you did, like what we gave you. But if you're not going to do that, that's on you. Like there was a lot of free will, even though he was
Mm.
like, but when things were going bad, he's like, have you gone to church? Right.
Right.
Whereas my mom would be like, my mom was the manifest one. My mom, since we were little, like I remember the first time I couldn't fit into a dress when I was in elementary school. I'm like, I'm fat. She's like, you're not fat. You're skinny. You're in the perfect weight. You're in the perfect health. I'm like, but mom, I'm not. She's like, no, you cannot manifest if you are saying what you don't want. And I'm like, in my head, I remember England will be like, but literally, I can't fit into this dress. But as you get older, you're like, oh, whoa, she was totally prepping us for the energy we're in now. And I also remember when I was in my first good paying job, my mom calls me. She's like, Mija, Oprah has this lady. She wrote a book called The Secret. Everything I teach you, everything is in this book. I can't believe it. She was kind of like almost sad that she didn't write the book. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't read the book, right? But
Right.
she raised us with all of the tenets that one could find in The Secret in the 80s and in the
Yeah.
90s, way before this was mainstream. And so when that book came out, I'm like, oh, you mean this is new to you guys? Oh, you mean your mom didn't have a vision board that she folded in under her mattress to make sure that she manifested? Okay, cool.
Right. It's new. So, were you ever out in the world, kind of like to like, what are you talking about, Ilona? Like that's not
Yes, and I
normal.
didn't care. Like
Nice.
because I will say, it's like a telenovela, like the poor farmer boy marries the aristocratic girl, and then they make
Yeah.
a new life in New York. And my mom was always very like, you belong. Don't ever let any. So on top of manifesting, she was also very like
Take
a
up
little bit like
space.
I'm like, yeah, like don't let anyone put you down. I think of like the Handmaid's Tales, no lites bastardes converandum, don't let the bastards grind you down. So she's very much like, you will not be. You're in, and it was very much like, and you're in America. You're here.
Mm.
You don't. It's almost like you don't have to hold the labels or the filters that where we come from. So she kind of raised us with like, we're here for a reason. You're
Yes.
here and you don't have to put up with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though systemically, like some people might argue that we still do. What would you say
Oh,
to
yeah.
that?
I mean, systemically, absolutely. I think the system is totally rigged. And at the same time, the only way we can free ourselves from the system is if we don't operate within the system. So if you say the system is against us and you comply within the way the system wants you to operate, and this might be a little bit manifesty, right? You're complying with the system. You're living up to the expectation of the system. If you don't give any Fs and you go, I'm going to give it a try nonetheless. I'm going to give myself that opportunity, even if the odds are stacked against me, and see how far I can get. That's where the liberation happens. How can you operate outside of what you're being given and knowing that there is a system that's going to hold you back? The system is never going to go away until, the miracles happen or we finally raise our consciousness or the aliens show up. But you cannot move. You cannot want to be liberated if you're still complying within the system, right?
Totally. The way that because I think in pictures as you're speaking, what kind of like came to me is like if someone's drowning, it's almost like you're drinking from the same water. That's not how you're going to stop drowning. The
Mm-hmm.
only way to stop drowning is to get out.
Exactly.
Get out of the pool.
Yeah.
Which,
Yes.
it's easier said than done, pero it's like we are also built to resist it. And we have that resiliency. And yes, like it sucks. And systemically, there's so many things against us. So many.
So much. So
Pero
much.
one resistance at a time.
Yes. Yes. And I also have this like thing of like some of us are fighting multiple systemic oppressions. And at the same time, like you said, we cannot fight all of them. Like right now, we are being assaulted with the level of oppression in the system or confronted with what can show up. And at the same time, we cannot do it all. Like there has to be, like a coaching. So I do coaching, right? So yeah, you can't eat the elephant all at once is that phrase, right? So what's the first bite? Maybe the first bite, if you're in this system, you're trying to fight it, maybe the first bite is you do everything you can to get out of debt. And then the next thing is you get your better job where you're making more money and you can save. And then, so you can't just go from like, I'm in the system to like, I'm this billionaire, which, everyone wants to do this quantum leap, which great. Some of us figure out that little shift, but some of us, sometimes it's just the small steps every day that get us to the goal in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are waiting to take the step because the conditions aren't perfect, but it's about the little shifts that move us more forward, to get us to the goal.
Yeah. I just had office hours and the call was literally about that. And it's funny how things happen, yeah. And literally what I said is, how could you do 1% today? Because by the end of next week, 7 days go by, you're 7% ahead. Rather than like just staying like, well, I can't move it because I'm like, to bring it back to my thing of the pool, you can't get out of the pool all the way. But how about you reach for the edge?
Yeah.
1%. Just reach 1%.
And I think about, in order to get, like, these are the right behavior change, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what we do in this world, in this work, with these podcasts or these books or this coaching. It's like we don't want to be part of these systems, but in order to get out of the systems, we need to change our behavior. In order to change our behavior, we need to see things in a different way. And if we don't begin to see things in a different way, then we will be fated to the destinies we're in instead of creating a new one, right?
Yes.
And so I do believe in free will. And I, at the same time, believe that there's a path that we can fall into. And it's not until we, really see what we're not seeing that we can shift into the destiny we want and not just the one that was created for us.
Totally. And it makes me think of when my parents had divorced, like when they separated. And, this is way back when that was a shame, like everybody stays together, like even though it's like the worst thing inside, pero the D word is not mentioned. And my dad left. And so I remember like it was things like Father's Day or whatever holiday, porque en Mexico, like there's always something to celebrate.
Right.
It's like
Latinoamerica. Yeah.
sí, which is fine. Like whatever, like es Día del Origen, vamos a hacer un like something. It's Día del Trabajo, we're gonna do like there's an event, Aquí
Yes.
you have the day off. No, allá is like you would do a whole folclórico, whatever.
Hay que celebrar la opresión, ¿no?
Exacto. And so when I was 11-ish, I would hear like, oh, your dad didn't come. You don't have a dad to come? Like, things like that. And so the lesson that my mom told me was you can't control what other people do. You can control how you choose to respond.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so
Beautiful.
to bring it back to what you just said, that's what came up for me is, well, we can always choose what's going to be our next action because the system will system.
Yeah. It's so funny because for some reason that made me think of, I lived in Queens, half Colombian, in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not familiar, in the 80s, there was a very bad man doing very bad things in Colombia.
Yeah.
And everyone escaped to either Miami or Queens. And I remember I had this white classmate who in the first grade was like, you're Colombian. Does your dad have drugs? And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you mean, drugs.
Right.
And I remember going to my mom and being like, Mom, because she's not Colombian. I'm like, why? Why do they keep on asking me? And she was just, my mom, Aries moon.
Ooh.
Very upset. And she's like, you tell them the Colombians make it, but the stupid Americans take it. So like there's the side of like, you can react to this differently, and there's a side of like we're going to react and we're going to throw fists,
No
right?
nos vamos a dejar.
No nos vamos a dejar. But either way, right? Like it is about like either way, those were resistance, right? Whether you go,
Correct.
I'm not going to interact with this, or I will not let you take me down or make me be smaller. It's not being like, haha, okay, you're funny, whatever, right? And so it's like how, and this, I think about astrology. I know we haven't gone to that part, but like in astrology, all of us, we're not meant to behave the same way.
Yes.
Astrology literally gives us a blueprint of behavior and tendencies. And that allows us to be authentic. And so it was authentic for my mom as a double Virgo with an Aries moon to be like, bring it on.
Yeah.
It was very authentic for me as a Libra stellium to be like, I'm going to keep the peace, but I'm not going to take it.
Right.
And so, but what you said was the most important thing. Do you understand your response to situations that are uncomfortable or not aligned? And how do you grow into the places that actually allow you to rise from those experiences?
And it's also a choice, because in your case, the choice was to respond to say, no me voy a dejar. And in my case, my choice was like what was instilled on us. The choice was to say, I'm going to choose to not respond to it. Not que se me resbale, like de mantequilla, put the mantequilla and then que se te resbale. And so that's the infamous, you use what you have and you
Yeah.
make it the best for you. Pero el
Yeah.
punto es que no te dejes.
Exactly. You don't have to comply. Once again, we don't have to comply to the systems we're in. We don't even have to comply to astrology, right? I'm a big proponent. I love it, but that doesn't mean we have to comply.
Totally. So how did Ilona get into astrology?
In my mother's womb, listening to Walter Mercado on Radio Wado
Right.
1280 in Nueva York every morning, Monday through Friday, every day. There was not a
¿Él
moment.
salió
When
en
the
el
morning she
radio?
missed, él estaba en Radio Wado 1280. I know. I remember the little jingle and all. And it was every morning. And it wasn't until like probably late 80s, mid and early 90s that Univision Primer Impacto is when he moved from radio to TV, right? Well, he had his own TV show, but in New York, he had his own segment every morning.
Qué pena con Walter, ¿eh?
Oh man. He was one of the good ones. He was an outlier and he was a good one.
Sí, pero por ejemplo, knowing what you know.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Which part? Which part of it all?
¿Cómo terminó? O sea,
well, he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was a double Pisces. Pisces is the most clairvoyant. Well, the characteristics and archetypes are the clairvoyant, the most spiritually connected, the most connected to God's universe, whatever you want to call it. My friend recently taught me Gus, God, universe, source, spirit. So I'm calling it Gus these days. And at the same time, every sign has gifts and every sign has shadows. And one of the shadows is disassociation and self-sabotage, right? Like he disassociated from the material human aspects of the legal financial implications of his business because he was like in the God source universe spirit energy. And he lost part of his business, right? Spoiler alert if you haven't watched the documentary. But at the same time, it's perfect. Like his experience was what he came to have, right? And the part I love is he didn't give up. Like 3 months before he died, he did this big festivity in Miami. Like it was like a exhibition of his capes, I think. Like I mean, he was like they can't take me down because he knew he was more than this the business than the finances. Like he continued to show up, right? And those are the lessons. We all have lessons. We all have things. That was Walter's thing. And hopefully if he has to come back in another lifetime, he learns, I'm going to pay attention to my books. I'm going to have a better lawyer and we're not going to get this taken.
Totally. And I love that perspective because it also shifts the narrative of like the documentary, for example, which is how it was portrayed. Because
he was a victim.
Correct. But the way that you presented it is like, well, what if he wasn't? What if he was thriving in his own way? And why couldn't we respect that? Because the victimhood of it is because it's portrayed the perspective of the human physical quote success that we are socialized and conditioned to believe is success. What if in his mind he was successful?
I mean, think about this. You've got the world's largest Catholic population on the face of the earth also coexisting with what's your sign? What's your chart? Like, have you done this? Or like, oh, no me puedo casar con él, es un Pisces, no puedo, right? Like he really infused the coexistence of astrology in a Catholic centered culture. And because there are other cultures that were conquered by Isabel and Ferdinand that had the same exposure but did not have altar, and therefore they don't have the coexistence of astrology and Jesus.
Yes. And it's transcended generations.
That's a win to me. That's a legacy I could never try to achieve. Like, that's huge.
Total. O sea, gente se pone camisetas with him, like with his face.
I mean, I used to have a poster on my wall of him, right? Like, I have a tote bag, right? Like, he's an icon.
Totally.
He's an icon of, and here's the thing that watching that documentary made me realize is that he was probably the most Christ-like person out of like a lot of these people, right? Because what was at the end of the day, what was his message? Que reciban de mí paz, mucha paz, pero sobre todo mucho, mucho amor. Like, he was literally love and peace. But people who didn't understand him were focusing on the capes and what sexuality is he or what is he doing, but they didn't hear the core message. Walter was literally saying peace and love, y'all. And I was like, dude, we missed the point. And he still gave us the love.
I know. Dang. What a teacher. So he's one of your teachers.
100%.
Learned from him in the womb. And
all my life.
How
every day.
Yeah, because after he came out the womb, he was still in the radio and TV, and then for sure.
Every day. I actually met him when I was like 8 years old. 8 years old. My mom and my grandma. He went to New York. He did his little things, and he had like specific like readers and stuff in New York. So my mom would sometimes go to bring us to the readers.
I didn't know he did in-person things.
Oh, he did.
Was he like the early version of Abraham Hicks type?
I think it was more like he would do one-on-one sessions. So it wasn't like he would do like he wasn't doing seminars. He was doing like one-on-one sessions in like people's apartments in Manhattan or like you know. And I remember my mom had a session, my grandma had a session, and I came in and apparently my mom always says, she's like, yes, you walked in and he said, mija, esa es alma vieja. And then he looked at my sister and he's like, esa es divina, me la llevo. And so like, it did give me a little like, I'm not the cute one, but I'm like the ascended one. Cool, I'll take it. But yeah, I had a brief encounter before my consciousness was fully formed with the man, the myth, the legend.
Wow. How was that session with your mom and grandma? Did they talk about it?
They don't talk. I don't remember because my grandma never talked about it. My mom was kind of like, she kind of came out and was really quiet. So we're like, okay.
Wow.
And my grandmother was not a quiet person. So
okay.
But I have a picture of my mom hugging Walter. It's all blurry, but you can tell it's them.
Pero ahí está.
And está.
We know it happened.
Yes.
And so how did you like really, really get into it? When did you decide I'm going to be, is it astrologer or astrologist?
That is a great question. I don't even call myself that. I call myself an astrology-informed life coach because my gift is the coaching. My training is a coaching. And I brought in astrology to the coaching. And so, like I said before, I feel like I've always had the astrology. Like I've never not ever brought astrology into the life that I live, whether it was that science fairs project that I had in retrospect. I remember in senior year of high school, a girl came up to me and be like, I will always remember the organs related to Scorpio because of your project. And I was like, I'm fascinated. We did it. We did a thing. We impacted one person. But I always had like when people were, having conflicts, I would ask like, well, what sign are they? And they'd be like, oh, they're an Aries. I'm like, well, then maybe they're not a jerk. They're just more reactive, right? So I always had that understanding, right? That ultimately some people use astrology for divination and some of us use it for personality archetypes and self-understanding. Mm-hmm. And so when I was doing my master's in coaching, I had 2 clients specifically that were just really struggling. And I don't know why. I had this moment where I was like, I know this is not conventional, but can I pull your birth chart? And I had never really pulled, I pulled birth charts for friends, but never like in a professional context. And I was like, of course, you've got this Chiron. This is your wound. Like everything you're talking about. Like I saw I was seeing, like the chart was speaking to me directly to what the pain points were in the coaching session. And I had this moment, I'm like, there's no way I can't bring these together. Like there's no, my consciousness, my ability to understand, process, and support required that foundational information in order to be like, okay, you're feeling stuck. Oh, you're feeling wounded. Oh, you don't know what to speak. Let's look at your Mercury. Hey, you're feeling emotional. What's happening with your moon, right? These like core data points of who we are is there. Whether we believe it or not, it's there.
Yes.
And when we understand it, we can realign, not to the world, but to ourselves. It starts with us. Everything starts with us. That's my issue with some of the divinational astrology. I'm never going to poo-poo it, but some people are relying on divinational astrology because they're putting the power outside of them instead of seeing it as a personality awareness point to strengthen themselves. Because when you actually go, okay, this is who I am, and I'm going to step into that, then you actually can free yourself from the system. Then you don't need the system.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't seem to make sense, but it's like, okay, when you know who you are, you no longer need the system because you know who you are.
Correct. There's no question about it.
And so that's the jam. Like
I'm with this jam. That's why we're friends. But like, so tell for the people that are not clear, what's the difference between divination and astrology, and how could they use astrology for their self-understanding?
Well, so divination is like, predicting the future or trying to figure out what's going to happen before it's happening. And so this is where people might rely on horoscopes or a reader to be like, well, what's coming up for me in the next 5 months? Which, once again, I don't think is bad. If you're like really like, I'm really stuck and I want this as an awareness point, then I'm like, go for it. But if you're like, I don't want to do the work, just tell me the answer, then that's where we lose our power. And so the difference is, so also, I don't know if people know, but Carl Jung, psychology foundational, he based a lot of his archetypes based on the astrology.
Is not widely known.
I know. And that's why I'm like telling everyone, like Carl, like you believe in psychology, but you don't believe in astrology, only to know that it influenced the systems that support you, because he came at it from a self-awareness point. What are your archetypes? What are your personas? Who are you being? Who are you not being, right? A lot of people are trying to push them. I'll see clients who are trying to push. They push so hard. I want this to happen. And then you look at your chart and you're like, your chart literally is telling you that I like people who are hustling. It's like your chart says be softer. People who are like, I always think of it this way too. Like ultimately too, when you know yourself, the what comes up in your chart just happens. Like it's not something you work at.
Yes.
But this is why I use it as a coaching tool, because it's the awareness of a blind spot. My father passed away in 2007, but all his life he's like, mija, cásese, forme la familia, do this. Like he was just so like wanting me to have this traditional family. And I was like I would like that, but I don't feel called to prioritize that, right? I never said like I rebuke this, but it was like, this doesn't feel like the calling. And when I started really getting into reading the whole chart and just not knowing that my son's in Libra, I have an empty 7th house. And the 7th house is the house of marriage. It doesn't mean I'm never going to meet. It doesn't mean I'm never going to get married. It means I cleared that in a past life, and that's not my focus. So if I do that, that's a cherry on the sundae, but it's not like where the energy is prioritized. I have almost half of my chart in the 10th house, my house of career and reputation. And like, I remember being a little girl and being like, I want to be famous. And people are like, what for? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just want people to know me. And people thought it was stupid. And I'm like, I know it seems silly, right? But then I understood, like, it was the psychological confirmation is you were designed to have this like tangible energía caliente there and not in the other place.
What is that house?
The 10th house, the house of reputation.
Mine is empty.
So for example, so let's talk about that. If it's empty, it doesn't mean you cannot be famous or cannot be well known for what you do. It's just not the focus, right? It's not where all of your energy is going. However, there will be cycles where that comes up. Why do I say that? Because the planets keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
The planets keep moving. And this is when we were talking about divination, we can use it. We could be like, oh, you might have a cycle in this year where a whole bunch of these planets that take longer to move are going to be hanging out there. And so it's probably in those years where that's going to be important for you.
Mm-hmm. So that's where, like, now everyone's talking about the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, because Pluto moved into Aquarius and it's going to be there for 20 years.
Right. And there's also a lot of fear that happens that I noticed from like that divination piece of like the French Revolution happened when Pluto was in Aquarius last time, and the blah 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 and the blah blah. And so, how using like could you give us using the chart? How could people support themselves so they don't fall into that fear?
What people I don't always lead with is I'm also a polyglot. I
I
was
know.
raised bilingual. I studied Italian, Portuguese, French. I tried to self-study Mandarin. But so and the, you know what that it's funny, right? Everything we do means something, and everything we do
Yes.
carries into. And what did I learn in language? Interpretation.
Yes.
And the issue with a lot of the internet astrologers, and they're beautiful ones, like as in their souls and also in physical, right? A lot of people who are because there is this trend of like these
Yes.
pretty young things, which no judgment, but they're all leading with the same sensational. This new moon is the best new moon to manifest in, and it's every time.
Right.
And it's like, no, not every. Like you don't want to manifest in a eclipse new moon. That's the worst thing you could do.
I know.
And so when you learn the art of interpretation, if you're interested in this work, listen to what they say, but then also learn the art of interpretation. And in order to be able to interpret, you need to know the spectrum. Everything is a spectrum. Nothing is black and white. Yes, Aries are known to be hot-tempered, but there are leaders. There are
Yes.
frontline people. There are guerreras, right? Like they're the ones who are going to fight. Where the opposite Libra, she's the peacemaker.
She's going to hold the space.
She's going to hold the space, but don't get it twisted. When something is wrong, she will be the one enrolling people to defend justice.
Yes.
Right. And so because she's known as a people pleaser, but she's also the one who knows how to bring people together and work together. And so there's an interpretive experience that sometimes is missed when we are being when we are listening to these people who have a very the polarized specific experience. Yes, the last time Pluto was here was the revolutions. At the same time, Aquarius, that is not only our revolutionary, it also represents the future. It's associated with technology. Pluto actually entered Aquarius 2 years ago, or last year, 2023.
Yeah. De enero a septiembre, ¿no?
Yeah. And so it's been going back and forth because that's what happens. It doesn't move fast. So when it retrogrades, it'll go back into the past sign and then goes back and forth. So now it finally stationed, which means it's never going to go back into Capricorn. And when Pluto entered Aquarius in 2023 was when ChatGPT was launched.
Yes. I know.
So is it revolution, or maybe this cycle it's technology?
Correct.
Like it's now let's call a spade a spade. The political environment is a little
hot.
It could lead to that kind of pattern. And at the same time, if more of us knew about these patterns, we could say, I don't want this pattern to repeat. I want another interpretation of this pattern.
Yes.
But some people, and so my issue with divination is some people are feeding the interpretation and then having people lead themselves to that interpretation, and then we talk about behavior and coaching. So do you want that revolution, or do you want a different outcome?
Mm-hmm. What's the choice you're making?
Yeah, exactly. So are you choosing the revolution, or are you choosing the future of technology?
Yes. Indeed. So interpretation and your polyglotness. Yes, you'd be throwing things that I'm like, what language did you speak? And it's like, oh, that was French. Okay.
Viva la révolution.
Right. Okay, let's take a quick coffee break because we haven't taken a coffee break. So, Ilona, do you drink coffee?
Sadly, I have been 20 years coffee free as I have Colombian. I drank too much in college and I gave myself an ulcer.
Oh.
Shame. Insert Game of Thrones. Shame.
O sea, de plan no puedes.
No puedo. Lo huelo y me encanta, pero no puedo.
Dang. Well, I'll drink it for you. So
yeah. Tea.
That's your choice?
Tecito.
What kind of tea?
my favorite is Earl Grey. It's delicious.
Ooh, that's very English.
It's like sweet, but it's still got the depth of like the black tea.
Yeah.
Right. It's got that little hit of bergamot, that little citrusiness. Right.
Yeah. Earl Grey is good. It's a good one. Do you
A
make
vanilla Earl Grey.
Do you make London fogs?
Yes, I do. Thank you for knowing that. Not everyone I know knows that.
So I used to, before I was a coffee drinker, I used to be a tea snob.
So we switched.
We switched. Indeed, we switched. In college is when I started drinking coffee. I just didn't give myself an ulcer.
Yeah,
we
thank
are still
goodness.
drinking it.
Thank goodness.
So I used to drink tea. In fact, I've talked about this in the show. One of my speeches in oral comm class was about tea.
I love it.
Yeah, I was that much into tea. And it was supposed to be a 10-minute speech. I think I went 18 minutes or something. And my teacher was like, look, I could have stopped you, but you're so animated and you're so passionate about this tea thing that I guess I just let you keep going. But you went way over time. And I'm like, because tea's awesome. So I was very much into tea.
It is. Coffee is also amazing. I miss it. I won't lie.
Yeah. Dang. Well, both Ecuadorian and Colombian coffee are good.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Colombian is probably far more popular. I think of when I think of Ecuador, I think of cacao.
Sí, claro.
Yeah, the cacao cultivation there, and there's a lot happening there with climate change, and so we get to pray for our lands so that they continue to produce our magic.
I know. I'm getting into cacao actually. I'm doing like a cacao, which I don't know. It might be a little problematic, but a certification to facilitate cacao ceremonies.
Well, isn't that the thing, right? These are our ancestral things, and yet because they're so global, the lands are depleting. Well, really, it's also global. I actually, Florencia, I forget her last name, Florencia from Cacao Lab, I think it's called. She and this other person that I follow on Instagram, Daniela, they did this mini documentary about all that's happening in Latin America with climate change and the cacao cultivation. And it's one of those things where the people of the land who actually hold the rituals don't have enough cacao for themselves because they have to use it for the market. But at the same time, it's this extremity, right? Like this is the extreme, the polarity. We don't in this world we've stopped operating from the spectrum, and we go into these polarities, and that depletes. Everything needs balance,
right?
And so, is it problematic? It's probably not problematic. La sangre llama. Your blood is saying, I need this in my life, and at the same time, how do we do it in a way where we're not depleting?
Exactly. And the teacher that I chose, she goes to the farms and works directly with the farmers in Ecuador, actually.
I love it.
And so,
I love it.
There's like the ethics of it that I wanted to make sure it was there.
Yeah.
While it's still probably an issue, but yeah, the polarity and the like late stage capitalism that is just extracting, which hopefully Aquarius comes to shift that a little.
We'll see. I will say Capricorn, is the archetype of the lady boss, the CEO, the ambitious one, the goat that's going to get to the top of the mountain. And in its shadow, it is the patriarchy. It is control. It is like, being on the top of the mountain while everyone else is on the bottom. And Aquarius is the opening. I think ultimately, whether, the system is the system.
Yes.
But I think whether the system leaves or remain, I think the gift will be, can we learn to work together?
Which I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
Because Aquarius is also the humanitarian. It is the collective. It is about how does everyone benefit? Every zodiac sign has a mythology. And one of the stories of the mythology of Aquarius that I read is like Zeus was hanging out one day on Earth and he saw this farmer and he liked the son. He's like, he's cute. I'm going to take him and make him one of my slaves. And the kid's like, I didn't want to be here. By the way, this is totally my interpretation.
Yes.
And so like Zeus goes and does his thing, but all the slaves are working. This little kid's like, I don't want to be here. Like, this is not my jam. Like, I was cool on my father's farm. And everyone's like, be quiet. You're going to get us in trouble. And he's like, F this. Throws the wine, floods the earth. All the gods are like, Zeus, your little dude is like making some trouble. And typically Zeus would have gotten rid of him, but Zeus was kind of like, I would have killed you, but typically you're actually right. I shouldn't have taken you. Let's fix this up. And it was so we have this, like, this is where we can see this archetype of rebellion, right? It's these little subtle acts of rebellion that the collective is uncomfortable with, but that impacts the collective for good.
So good. That's a good stop for the coffee break because we were still there.
Yes.
Let's get back to the show. Okay, so astrology-informed life coach.
Yes.
How did we get into human design?
That's a great question. When I started going all in the human design, astrology-informed life coaching, I had a few friends that are like, but have you heard of human design? But have you heard of human design? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I got astrology. Like, I don't need anything else. And then a friend had been trained and did a little bit for me. And I'm like, oh, this lands. And then I had a formal reading with this woman, Jasmine Kenna, who does these really cool subliminals for centers of human design. And I was like, whoa, like this actually differentiates me in a way that astrology couldn't.
Yeah.
And so, but then it's also understanding how we use different assessments, right? Like for example, if you're in the business world, you wouldn't use strengths finders to figure out how someone might not do well in a team environment, because strength finders is to be like, what is your biggest gift and how can we use that, right? And so, the first thing was like, well, what's the purpose? And so astrology is the story of your life. A lot of people come to me being like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And astrology does a great job of telling us that story.
Yes.
Human design is, how does your energy interact in the quantum field at its very core? So it's very complicated, but at its very core, it's like, how does your energy work? How's your energy work?
It's deep.
But the thing is, it's influenced by astrology, the Kabbalah, the I Ching, the chakra system. And so there's also like tons of like you can spend years learning. I certainly don't call myself like a master human design teacher, but I've studied this pretty deeply and I have a strong foundation of the chakras and astrology, and I'm really getting to the I Ching. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I have all of the components that allows me to feel comfortable in this. And so I had this moment where right at the beginning of the pandemic, like actually it was a month before the pandemic happened, I had two friends who were also getting into it. And we were like, yo, we don't have $30,000 to pay for a certification. Why don't we get together once a week? And we studied it for 2.5 years by ourselves every week. Like sometimes our calls were 2 or 3 hours. Like we went all in, we unpacked everything. We talked about our perspectives, because I'm a manifestor. One of them was a projector. One of them was a generator. We were just missing the reflector, right? So we were able to also, so if you don't know about human design, there are 4 aura types with a subtype. So there are 5 energy types. And so there was this ability to be like, oh, how do you experience this as a projector? Hey, how does this feel for you as a manifestor? Or hey, what is your challenge as a generator? And be able to really not only consciously, logistically study it, but also experientially discuss it. And so that it just became a point where I couldn't also add like that moment when I was with the client, let me look at your chart. It became, hey, I'm going to look at 2 of your charts and we're going to unpack everywhere this information may be coming from, because it might not be here, it might also be here.
Totally. And so you wrote a book.
2.
Yes. You wrote a book. 1 is coming out.
Yes, correct.
The new one is coming out.
Yes.
That's the one that, well, tell us about the first one and then you tell us about the one that's coming up.
So the first one was a fun, beautiful book with chronicle books. It was called This Journal is Your Mood Ring. It was a journal unpacking emotion through colors, kind of inspired by the old school mood rings. And that was a fun one to write. And then that led to me telling my book agent about human design one day and her becoming obsessed because we were both manifestors. And she's like, I never affiliated with astrology. This don't make sense. And one day she's like, hey, I want to pitch a human design book. Will you help me write the proposal? I'm like, yeah. And it ended up becoming a book deal. And so I was like, whoa, like, isn't it exciting when you share your like your enthusiasm? Like, right, for me, it's a lot about like I gotta love what I'm doing. It has to be the thing that I want to do. And it's interesting because it's called Human Design Made Easy, which in a world where SEO and all those things don't exist might not have been my original title. But the idea, because a human design, I think intrinsically can never be easy because there's so much to unpack.
Yes.
But this book is truly an intro, because ultimately my experience is a lot of people are getting exposed to probably what I call like mid-level information. Like it's not beginner, but it's not advanced. And so they're operating from the mid-level without understanding the
The
foundations.
foundation, yes.
And so the book really addresses the foundations. And the guy who created human design kind of always in the beginning, well, he kind of talked about strategy and authority. It's kind of like a start. There's a starting point, right? When I was learning language, I didn't go to conjugations. I learned the basics,
Basic
right?
words, yes.
Like I am, you are, and then we learned like some of the foundational words, right? And so the same thing I think with any system is there's a foundation of like a natural flow of where one thing can take you to the next. Now, in human design, there's also like people have different energies and people will flow. Some people are more strict, some people are more flowy. But if we're going to really help the people who have like need to step 1 to step 2, this book is truly a step 1. Like this is like human design 101.
Yes.
It might even be your prerequisite course before you go further, right?
100%. Because, I mean, I heard about human design like, I don't know, 5 maybe years ago, something like that. And I was like, no, this is too much. Like my brain was not about it. I'm a manifesting generator.
Fast.
I know. And so there was a part of me that was like, but learn it. You can learn all the things. I'm constantly learning all the things. And so I've been like in and out. And then I met you and I'm like, oh, then I don't have to learn. I can just ask you questions.
It's my jam. Interestingly enough, and so talking about the idea that human design can give you things that astrology may not, even though it has astrology, it deepens things in the understanding. Like there are 64 gates. Each gate is like a gift or something that I kind of, when you look at the human design map, it looks like an IKEA map. Like, okay, this is how you're built.
Yes.
And for me, it's like, this is how we build the computer that is your energy. And you're going to have parts that are not there. It doesn't mean you're missing. You're just not built with that. And you're going to have parts that are there. And so the little gates, they're kind of like codes. Like these are parts of Pam that cannot be denied.
Yes.
And they're associated to the planets.
Yes.
Which is associated to astrology. So like my Libra sun is connected to gate 48, which is known as the well, which is like this energy that can hold and only can give when asked, right? So like I'm very good at being like, I know all these languages, I know these things, I know all these systems, I know all these resources, but I can't, like, it's not like I'm going around being like spitting out information. I must be, this is why coaching is great for me, because I have so much information and the people actually need me to give them this information, right? But when we look at astrology, I'm a Libra. You would never, like, from the archetypes you give to Libra, Libra would never be considered like the resource.
Totally.
She's the feminine, she's the empress, she's the diplomat, but the resource, not necessarily our primary archetype. And so when we bring all these things together, you're like, oh yes, I love this.
I love it. So where can people find the book?
Wherever books are sold, online and you can go, right now my publisher is Union Square Publishing, but truly anywhere online, Amazon, it can be found. I'm really excited. I mean, if you are a traditional going to a bookstore person and it's not at your bookstore, please ask them to carry it. That would be such a gift. As authors, we can't influence everyone, or we don't know who is going to want this, but that really helps us in our mission to get this message across.
Totally.
Things that I'm learning, things that they don't tell you about what people do to make these things happen, right?
Totally. And local libraries, as we said,
Yeah.
local bookstores, local libraries is super important because, I mean, I interview authors all the time, so I've been like catching nuggets from all of them. So definitely go to your local bookstore, ask for it so they can order more. Go to your local library. If you don't have the means to buy it, ask your local library to get it, because typically they get dozens of them.
Yes.
So that helps the author. And even it's not always that they'll order a dozen, but they order 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And so the more sales, the better for the author, because that's evidence that people want to read content written by Latinas, which is our goal, is to get us more of us in those bookshelves. And the way to do it, if like you don't have to buy 30 books, go to your local library and ask for it. That's the easiest way.
Yeah.
To in free.
Yes.
To support.
Yes. Thank you for that. It's funny. I remember I was like, I think I want to become like the Walter Mercado of human design. I haven't figured it out yet, but I want to be able to bring that.
It. How fun. That's exciting. I mean, I have so many questions about human design and astrology and all the things, but this is why maybe you can be a resident
I
all
would
the
love
things.
that.
¿Cómo se llama tu resident oracle that you
Resident.
brand?
Oh yeah, I'll take that. I like that because then it's not stuck to astrology or human design
Yeah,
person, right?
a resident oracle.
I love it.
So tell us all the places now where we can find you.
I am on. I probably. I'm going to be honest. I'm primarily on Instagram. So if you look for Ilona Pamplona, I'm there. I'm going to respond. I'm going to show up. I am developing. So one of the interesting things is from this book. I also got trained in something called the Genius Report, which is taking human design for a business and professional context and helping people guide kind of like how they show up for their businesses and their work and collaborations. So I'm launching a new brand. So you're the one who's going to hear it first.
Yay!
And the website's already up. It's called yourauraatwork.com, where you can get resources. We're going to have blogs. I'm going to have blogs and information. We're going to have paid reports to go into deeper detail if you want to, if you don't have time for a reading, but you want the tea on your talents or how your aura works, how your aura is at work. We're going to have a lot of that. And I'm probably going to also start your aura at work LinkedIn page. So I know, because I feel like right now
get
we're in a
that
place where
corporate.
people, yeah, well, also like, and this is why when we're doing, I said that we have to start with us. And I do think the new generation is very self-aware and they're doing the self-awareness work. But then the next step is from us to the people, right? And so sometimes people have these tools and they don't know actually how to use it with others and how it impacts others. So really, I think my goal is to really take it to the next level of the conversation. Okay, you know yourself and how are you bringing it to these spaces? How is your aura working in these spaces, especially in the space of late stage capitalism? We still got to go to work. We still have to have a business. We still got to make that money. And how do we really maximize our energy to be in the world with the energy that we want the world to go into? It probably won't be as philosophical. It'll probably be a little more tangible, but we get to give ourselves practical tools for using this energy in practical places.
I love that. And the brand is ready if people want to reach out to you.
Yes.
Your ideal client for that is a corporate.
No, not so. I'm saying professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives.
Okay.
Right? People who want to do things with their work and want to understand how to take it to the next level for themselves and the world around them. Yeah.
And I had that read, actually. You did the Genius Report on me. And that was super fun because I got to discover what is the thing that I don't have energy for?
It's the ego, the willpower.
The willpower. And so I borrow yours. I've borrowed yours before. And I think this is why I have a co-working space.
We discussed that.
Like a virtual co-working space that I created because I need other people's willpower to feed mine.
Yep.
But the magic that happens when we're in the room, I actually can tell when other people may not have it because I'm like, I still don't want to do anything. But when people do, I'm like, let's go. And we just get shit done.
Yep.
It's really good.
Exactly.
And that is found through the Genius Report.
And well, that's part of the human design system. The Genius Report tells us some of those things, right? Like where are you not the lead energy? Where are you not giving that energy, but you need to receive it, right? So in human design, we have open centers and defined centers, but Genius Report kind of contextualizes and say, hey, what are you giving and where are you receiving? And when you know where you're giving, you know that you can lead with that. Where you know that you're receiving, then you know you need to receive that. So Pam, the willpower, it's going to be, that's where you get to receive willpower from others. You may not be giving that to people and learning to be supported, right? And that's the teamwork. That's the teamwork, right? Like, oh, it's not about saying, oh, I can never get this project done. It takes me forever. It's like, okay, who gets to level me up? Who gets to give me a boost? Who gets to put their USB port of my computer and give me a little like break so that I don't have to be efforting in that spot?
Totally. And it makes such a difference. The other thing that I found out about human design is that it tells you how to manifest.
Yes.
Which we talked about it recently.
There's so much.
There's so much.
Human design it literally takes it to the next level. I will say, I will never abandon astrology, but human design takes this information to the very next level.
Yeah. Because I realized that I am
non-specific.
I'm non-specific active. So what you call it different?
I called it passive, but yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but ultimately you're non-specific manifester.
I'm non-specific and I need to talk about it all the time.
Yeah. But it's also interesting because think about like when people talk about manifestation, they give very like you
It's
need
the
to know the
opposite.
exact day and the exact dollar amount, and you have to have this vision board. And I'm also non-specific, and I was like, why can't I get on board with vision boards? Because for some people, they need the tangible motivation, the tangible goal. For some people, they need to feel it like it's already happening, right? And so even distinguishing that, I think about all the people who try all those things.
It
Like I
don't
think
work.
about like Sex and the City when Charlotte was trying to manifest a husband,
Right.
and the woman's like, maybe you're just not trying hard enough. And she's like, I'm doing
I
all
know.
the things. And it's like, maybe that wasn't, maybe she needed to be non-specific. Maybe she needed to be really like, what does it feel like to have a partner in my life? What would that feel like right now? Can I tap into that?
And that's how I've manifested like once I realized this, I went kind of like back into the archives. My car, it was non-specific. It was all about feeling. I would literally go every night. I would look at a picture, but I would focus more on the brand new car smell. Like literally, I would just like smell it in my head, and then I would go to bed like, "Ooh, this feels so good." To like, when you get in the car and it's like, "Oh, this is brand." That was the thing. 2 weeks, I had a brand new car in the
Ah,
wildest way. Like it took me 2 weeks to manifest that,
I love this.
and it was like a
Yeah,
wild thing.
it's so aligned. When I learned about non-specific manifesting, I literally had, it was the year of the pandemic. It was August. I spent 3 months rehabilitating my sister after a traumatic brain injury, and I had $0 coming in and $0 in my bank account. Luckily, I live with my mom, so I'm like, at least I don't have to pay rent. And I learned about this, and I'm like, okay, let me just sit here. And I was in my bed. It was like I was depressed. It was noon. I was like, okay, let's see if this works.
Yeah.
And I was like, what would? And I didn't say I needed a client or a spit, but I was like, what would it feel like for someone that I used to work with just to show up and be like, I'm ready to work with you, and I don't have to push myself. Okay. And I was like, what would it look like? What would it feel like for someone to pop out of a referral? And I was like, oh, that feels good. The very next day, someone I worked with in January texted me the next day to be like, I'm ready to work full-time coaching with you. And I was like,
Yes.
like,
See?
wait, what? Like,
I know.
is it that easy? Now, the thing is, we forget that we get to continue to choose that experience. And sometimes we
Mhm.
don't continue to manifest because we go, that was good. I'm good. You don't need to give me
Right.
more. And so it's like, how do, I think a lot of coaching and this work is how do we continue to experience that? We're supposed to experience these miracles,
I know.
but we're so caught in fear, right? We're so caught in the fear of,
Yes.
of the reality that we don't allow the miracle to happen.
Yeah, because it's been so vilified también.
Yeah.
Like I think of my mother, for example. Yo siempre le digo que ella tiene voz de profeta because it's like she must be specific. I haven't checked her chart actually. Pero, o sea, cada vez, o sea, haz de cuenta, I don't have a specific example, but it could be something like, ay, ¿sabes qué? Se me antoja comer pizza today. Y lo dice, right? And we're like, oh, pues maybe we can make pizza. And then David, my partner, gets home with pizza that night. Like, and she's like, oh my
What's her
gosh,
design? Do you know her design?
no sé porque no sabe
Okay,
a
we
qué hora
got it.
nació. I
En la
know.
próxima, aún hay más.
Aún hay más, sí. Porque it's like, and so she knows how powerful she is. Y ella solita lo dice. Mejor ni quiero decir porque se va a hacer realidad. And I'm like, Mom, I'm going to give you a list of all the things I need you to say for me so you can
Yeah.
manifest it for me.
Well, and that's one of the things they say in human design. If you have the throat center attached to a motor, then anything you say has this power, right? It's the manifestation
Mhm.
portal. So I'm like, is she a manifestor or manifesting generator? Because
Probably.
that sounds like someone with a throat chakra connected to a motor, if I've ever heard it.
I know. I'll try to find out and then we can like nerd out on it.
But at the end of the day, it's alignment. At the end of the day, it's alignment. When you're really aligned,
Mhm.
I think about the Course in Miracles, and I feel like that's a conversation in itself, right? Like,
Yes.
there's this idea that like we literally should be experiencing miracles every day, and that if when we truly get connected with that, despite the circumstances in the world, we literally can see the magic in every day. I used to say that I wanted my coach to be magical realism because I've a lot of my life has been that. Like, I manifested my first book deal. I manifested a trip to Cancun with MTV in college. I had all these things where people like I remember when the pandemic happened thinking like, well, this would suck if we all are gone because of this. But I'm like, and at the same time, I did so much that I feel so satisfied. I felt so like, I'm like, there's more that I would like to do, but I felt complete because there was so much I manifested. I'm like, I did a lot. I made things happen. And I think that's how we, going back to the beginning, this system.
And it's also a choice to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's actually the revolution.
Correct.
Choosing the joy, choosing the manifestation, choosing the best possible outcome. It's actually not the easiest to want to choose joy.
Correct. Negativity bias will always come in because the brain is designed for that. That's the evolutionary trait that we cannot change.
I know.
Y por eso the choice is to choose the miracle.
The revolution is to choose the miracle.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So good. Ilona Pamplona, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam.
Gracias, amiga.
Tengo 3 preguntas que we can like rapid fire them.
Yeah.
What's your remedio?
I will say in my house, our remedio was always agua de Florida, though.
You've told me that. Siempre,
yeah.
sí.
Like we lived with the Florida water. I have Florida water in spray format now. Like we would go to get a test and my mom would put agua de Florida. We didn't feel well, agua de Florida. Alguien te dijo algo mal, agua de Florida. So
why not?
I will say that's the energetic remedio in my house.
I love that. Yo tengo, me lo estoy chiquiteando porque es Palo Santo water from Ecuador, actually.
My God. We need to do a pilgrimage.
We do. And like, y aquí dice, hecho en Ecuador. One of my friends from Ecuador sent it to me and she was like, esto no lo encuentras en ningún lado más que en Ecuador. And so like, I have like, ooh, but I use it all the time.
I love it.
It smells so good.
It's so delicious. I have like a salve del Ecuador de Palo Santo. Yeah, I have it in a drawer and sometimes I open it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Palo Santo salve. And I don't want to use it. Like, solo lo quiero usar cuando like de veras lo necesito.
Sí, te lo estás chiquiteando también. Okay, and what's your quote or mantra that you live by right now?
Well, I have a friend on Instagram. I've never met her in person, but I feel like she's a soul sister. It's You, Me Healing. And she's Latina as well. She lives in the Bay Area. And she does all these motivational posts and she sells the posters too. So if you want to have them in. So I have this poster to the side of me that is that the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence, because, that also is how we release ourselves from the systems. Like that is so important to me. Like it's so easy to get stuck on the victimhood of what didn't happen or when they did this or blah, 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 blah. But it's just information. Yes. It's not where we get stuck, right? And at the same time, it is a place of reference, which means we don't get to ignore it. We get to witness it, but we don't get to live there. And so it's always such a powerful distinction for me. So Cristina, if you're hearing this, I love your quotes.
Yes, I love that. And do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share?
That is a great question. As someone who, I think about human design, I would definitely say that the co-working is huge. If you're interested in looking up your human design, and you can find out if you have an empty or undefined, like white color, not in color, ego center, which is a little triangle we can discuss. Co-working will be your jam. Body doubling will get you to the places you've never imagined.
Yes.
I also think calming down your central nervous system. I breathe a lot when I'm panicking and I can't get things done. Just like breathing and hydrating just shifts me back. It's like simple, but it's like, it is sometimes that simple.
Totally. Yes, indeed. And like I could see people rolling their eyes like, is it simple? But it is.
It's a choice. I choose to make it that simple.
I choose to believe it's simple, indeed. Bueno, thank you so much. This was super fun.
This was.
And like, ya dijiste, you're a resident oracle.
Como decía Raúl Velasco, aún hay más.
Aún hay más. Nos vemos para la próxima.
Mucho amor, gente.
Mucho amor. Bueno, listeners, that was my conversation with Ilona. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I think, and I'm serious, when I told her I want her to be a resident astrologer, let me know. Now, what I do love about Ilona that she's taught me when it comes to astrology is the using astrology to get to know yourself more than to predict things, because that was something that always didn't resonate with me so much, which was the predictivity, like the divination part of it. And kind of like hearing the validation from Ilona, who was like, I use astrology as a tool to get to know yourself better versus, predicting what could happen, is going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. That was something that changed my perspective a lot. And she's a friend, but she's also one of my, like, I consider her a teacher because she knows a lot about those very two things, human design and astrology, and so many more. Like, Ilona is totally an encyclopedia. And so I would love to know what you think about this episode. Screenshot, tag us at Cafe Compa Podcast on all of the socials. Do tell me how you feel about this and what your thoughts are on what we discussed. I think this was a very philosophical type of episode, and I hope we didn't lose you in the process. But I would really love to know what you're thinking. And let's stay connected. At Cafe Con Pan Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, cafeconpam.com is where you can find about all the things that we are doing at all the times in any moment. If this is your first time here, welcome to Cafe Con Pam. I hope you stay. I hope you return. Depending on where you are listening to us, subscribe, follow. I don't know what other buttons or what other calls to action there are. Ring the bell, all the things, because you don't want to be missing out on these awesome episodes. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. I hope you are staying warm. I'm in the northern hemisphere where we are moving into winter. It's still fall, but this is, very fall-ish, very you can already see the winds picking up, the leaves falling off the trees, and it's very much a time to shed and to begin winter, begin slowing down. And that's what we're doing over here. Y bueno, nunca se te olvide to stay shining. Sabrosura pa' ti que